All right, don't freak out about what's on the screen. Hi, everybody. Israel here, and we're going to talk about Hebrew. Hebrews can be a little bit scary and overwhelming because it's a very, very old language. In fact, I don't think there's any other language this old that's still being used. But it's a powerful link to the past. It's a powerful way for us to wrap our heads around what I've been talking about in these videos, the Kabbalistic tree of life. Finding the frontier of our knowledge domains and breaking through that frontier to become find true genius and expertise in ourselves. And so, I've been talking about the Kabbalistic tree of life, Hebrew language. And so I'm going to dive into this. I think we don't have to learn Hebrew to understand this concept, but it's a really good analogy that I think opens the door in some ways. And what we're trying to do is let our brains catch up with the ideas that we're talking about, that I'm trying to expose you to in this series, so that we can get eventually to a practice. This is all building up to a practice, and not only a practice, but practical tools to unlock new insight and knowledge in the world around us, and to create new meaning, and to link ourselves to that meaning, and to connect ourselves to the world around us in a fascinating and profound way. And that is where all this is going. So stay tuned. The first step we've already talked about. I think the second and third steps we've already talked about is this idea of unfolding knowledge. But I want to use the Hebrew alphabet to make a critical point on this journey. So what you're looking at in front of here is an example of the Hebrew alphabet. This is kind of a later stage Hebrew alphabet. Again, we don't have to know or memorize any of this. And again, you can Google all of this for yourself. That's all I'm doing, is bumping around the internet, finding the documents that are going to help expand our understanding of this system and set the context. But I want to look at these. So I want to look at these characters, and I want you to be as critical as you can, because in the concept of this language, and this is, like I said, a later version of it. It's a little bit closer to the modern Hebrew that's used. These did change, which, going back and looking at them in their original version, which I can't remember the term that they use for those, but the original version of these, they're also called idiots, that linked back to the tree of life. But what I want to do is I want to talk about the fact that they don't really look exactly like the characters that they are expected to be. So for example, if we look at Aleph here on the top right, it's meant to be an ox. But if you look at it, it doesn't exactly look like an ox, at least to me. I could make the argument that these are maybe like legs, and this is like a torso in the middle. Or I can make the argument that this is the tongue of a plow, and each of these is an ox on either side of it. There's a couple different ways that I can convince myself this could be an ox, but it doesn't immediately jump out to me as an ox, right? And let's look at the next one, Beth, which is basically the letter B. A tent or a house, it says. Okay, maybe, like, I can see how this bottom part could be a flat place on the earth where I set a tent. But what is this curved part? I suppose that could be the kind of the arm of a tent, where it has, like, I don't know much about tents. Let's jump to the next one. This one is called the camel. It's Gimel. Okay, like, really does not look like a camel to me, right? Like, this maybe could be the head. Maybe this is a leg. Maybe. If I jump down to this one that's called Teth, it's a snake. Okay, kind of can see how this would be a head. This might be a tail, but I've never seen a snake that had a tail like that. Maybe this is the head and that's the tail. Okay, so maybe it's standing upright. What I'm saying is that there's actually a little bit of a process that I have to go through to get my mind to be convinced that these could be the characters they're meant to represent. Right? There's a little bit of a leap that I have to take. And as I was talking earlier in a previous video, our minds are trained to filter stuff out. We've actually been trained by our family and by our education systems and by our bosses and by our careers and by ourselves to see the world in a certain way. But in order for us to break through to that next level, we have to be able to get our minds to open up and accept new ideas. And looking at tools like this and talking through them and trying to help my mind see how this could be the palm of a hand, for example, or this could be the eyes of a person. Trying to make that linkage is actually difficult. It actually requires a little bit of effort and a little bit of thought. And I don't think it's important to memorize these letters or memorize the names of them, but studying them to help us realize that gap between how we expect something to look and how it actually looks is actually a really interesting technique. And I'm going to talk about it a little bit more in my next video, where I'm going to talk a little bit more about Egyptian hieroglyphs.